Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I want to
Yeah.
start today with a question that honestly feels a little bit dangerous to ask.
Oh, I love a dangerous question. It usually means we're about to break something down that people just take for granted.
Right. Let's hear it then. Well, it's a question that runs completely contrary to, pretty much everything we're taught. From the moment we enter the school system to the moment we sit down to plan our retirement.
Right.
It's the kind of question that, if you really sit with it, might make you look at your bank account and your career trajectory with a completely different set of eyes.
You have my attention. What's the setup?
So here is the setup. We live in a world that is absolutely fundamentally obsessed with accumulation.
Right.
That is the default setting of modern life. It is the water we swim in. You accumulate assets, you accumulate money, you accumulate followers, experiences.
You're trying to build the biggest pile.
Exactly. The person with the most stuff at the end, whether that's cash, real estate, or social clout, wins the game.
He who dies with the most toys wins. That was the bumper sticker of the 90s, and I really don't think we've moved past it at all.
Not at all.
We've just digitized the toys. Now it's Bitcoin and influence, but the mechanic is exactly the same. More is better. Growth equals accumulation.
Exactly. It's a completely linear way of thinking. But here is the hook for today, and this is what we are going to spend this deep dive unpacking for you.
Let's do it.
What if that entire model is
Wrong in what way?
And I don't mean morally wrong. Oh, it's nice to be generous and share your toys with the other kids. Structurally wrong. What if the only way to actually grow yourself and a real you, the core of your personality, the thing that looks back at you in the mirror every morning, what if the only way to grow that is to give it all away?
Wow, that is the ultimate paradox right there. It sounds like a riddle.
It does.
Because in the material world, if I have a car and I give you my car, I don't have a car anymore.
Right, you're walking.
Exactly. That is a net loss. It's simple subtraction. But the source material we are diving into today argues that the human personality operates on a completely
Different physics.
It argues that subtraction is actually the only mechanism for addition.
And to be clear for everyone listening, we aren't just riffing on some new age self-help book here.
No, definitely not.
We aren't talking about manifestation theories or vision boards. We are doing a deep dive into a very specific, very dense stack of lectures and exegesis regarding the Quran.
Specifically, we are looking at an analysis of Surah al-Baqarah verses 261 to 265.
Right. And the sources call this section the architecture of the self.
Which is just such a striking title, architecture.
It really is.
It implies that your personality isn't just a ghost in the machine. It's not just this random bundle of moods and chemicals and memories floating around in your skull.
Right.
It's a structure. It has a foundation. It has load-bearing walls, design principles, and most importantly, if you build it with the wrong materials, it will collapse.
So our mission today is to essentially decode these blueprints. We're going to look at what the sources call the physics of the soul.
I love that phrase.
It's great. And we have three main pillars to get through today, and each one is a bit of a mind bender.
For sure.
First, we're going to look at the farmer's gamble. This is the idea of why the conviction you feel inside is actually way more important than the literal money you give outside.
And then we're going to move into the false ego trap.
Oh, man.
This is the part that frankly made me rethink every charity gala I've ever seen or been invited to.
Seriously.
We'll discuss why building a hospital with your name plastered on it might be, according to these sources, spiritually worthless. Actually, maybe even worse than worthless.
And finally, we are going to land on a concept called tathbeat, the heavy hitter. It's a psychological term that explains how sacrificing wealth is the only way to literally integrate your personality so it can survive death.
Right, so it's a journey from economics to psychology to metaphysics. It is a complete holistic system.
So let's just jump right in. Segment 1, the physics of the soul versus the body. I want to start with the most basic biological reality, just to set the stage for you. If I want to grow my body, if I want to get stronger, or honestly just stay alive, I need to consume.
Right.
I need protein, I need calories, I need water. I have to take things from the outside world and put them inside me.
Correct. That is the fundamental law of the animal kingdom. The biological entity survives and thrives by consumption.
It's basically entropy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You extract resources from your environment, oxygen, water, food, and you assimilate them into your own cells to fight off entropy.
Because if you stop taking, you die.
You die. That is the animal self. It is entirely driven by the law of self-preservation through accumulation.
But the source material draws a very hard line here.
It does.
It says humans have a dual nature, aren't just sophisticated monkeys walking around.
Right. We have the animal body, yes, but we also have
The zat. Let's pause and unpack that because it's such a crucial term in the text.
So you can translate Zat as the self, or the personality, or perhaps the ego in the Jungian sense, though the sources suggest it's even deeper than that.
It's the core.
It is the conscious I that exists behind your eyes.
Right.
And the argument in these texts is that the Zat is non-material. And because it is non-material, it operates on a completely inverse law to the physical body.
So if the body grows by taking in,
The Zat grows by
by giving out.
The source uses the term infaq here. Now, we really need to stop and define infaq carefully because the usual English translation is just spending.
Spending is way too weak of a word.
It doesn't capture the essence at all.
Because when I hear spending, I think of buying a latte. Or when I hear charity, I think of dropping $1 in a jar at the grocery store checkout.
Right. It feels optional. It feels light. It's just a nice little thing you do.
Exactly. And that is what we need to unlearn for the next hour.
Completely. The root word of infaq in Arabic is related to
Nafaq.
which actually refers to a tunnel. Specifically, a tunnel used by a desert rodent, a jerboa, to escape predators.
A tunnel.
The key feature of this tunnel is that it has an entrance and an exit. It implies a throughput.
A three-put.
Yes, it implies creating an opening for resources to pass through you, not to stop at you.
So you act as a conduit. You aren't a bucket holding water. You're a pipe letting the water flow.
You become a conduit. That's
Yeah.
a perfect way to visualize it. Infrac isn't just tipping the poor.
Right.
It implies a continuous, open-ended circulation of your wealth, your time, and your effort for a purpose higher than yourself.
And for the benefit of others.
Yes, it's not just sweeping the crumbs off your table and giving them away. It is the meal itself. It is a massive structural reshaping of your entire economic life.
And this is where the physics aspect really comes into play. Because to the material eye, to my accountant, looking at my spreadsheet, infaq is a straight-up loss.
It's a liability.
If I have $1,000 and I give away $500, I have less purchasing power. I am mathematically weaker in the market. I can buy less food, less security, less comfort.
You are diminished in the material world. You literally have less mass.
Right.
But the source argues that to the spiritual eye, or the eye of this architecture of the self, you have just gained mass.
Right.
By losing it, by detaching that resource from your own animal needs and attaching it to a higher divine principle, you have actually expanded your zat.
That is honestly a terrifying thought for most people. The idea that hoarding, which feels exactly like safety to us, is actually shrinking you.
Because we are wired to hoard. Evolution taught us to hoard because
Winter is coming. Keep the grain.
Exactly. But spiritually, hoarding is the definition of atrophy. Think about a muscle. If you bind a muscle up and protect it and never stress it, what happens?
It wastes away. It becomes useless.
It wastes away. The source argues that wealth is the weight we lift. If you don't use your wealth to circulate resources to others, your personality wastes away.
So you become a consumer of existence rather than a contributor.
And in this system, consumers eventually implode. They collapse under their own gravity because they're just pulling everything inward.
Wow. So the body says keep to survive, and the soul says give to exist.
Precisely. And that friction, that intense war between your biology and your psychology, that is exactly where human development happens.
That leads us directly into the central metaphor in these verses, which is the farmer's gamble. This is segment 2.
Right.
The source text spends a lot of time analyzing verse 261 of Surah al-Baqarah. And I want to read the imagery here because it's very specific and very visual. It's not abstract philosophy at all.
No, it reads like an agricultural manual. Please do read it. The imagery is the key to unlocking the whole logic.
It says the example of those who spend their wealth in the way of Allah is like a grain which grows 7 ears. In every ear, 100 grains.
So you plant one and you get back.
700. That is a 70,000% return on investment.
That is an absurd multiplier.
Right. Now, if I walked up to you on the street today and said, hey, give me $1, and I absolutely guarantee you $700 back by next Tuesday,
I would call the police or run away.
you'd say this is a Ponzi scheme.
Or a crypto scams. It sounds way too good to be true. It sounds like literal magic.
But the source says this isn't magic, it's agriculture, it's biology. But there is a catch. There's
Always. The catch is the variable of time and the variable of trust. The source calls this
Mukum Yakin.
the farmer's conviction.
The speaker in the lectures really breaks down what it feels like to be a farmer. And I found this deeply fascinating because most of us we buy our food at the grocery store.
Swipe a card.
Yeah. We've completely lost the visceral reality of what planting actually means. When we think of planting, we think of it as a hobby, like putting a little tomato plant in the backyard on a Sunday.
We are so detached from the source of our survival. But in the context of this revelation, and honestly in the context of most of human history, farming is a life or death gamble.
Right.
Think about the farmer in an arid climate thousands of years ago. He has grain in his house.
He has grain.
That grain isn't just seed in a little paper packet he bought at a hardware store. That grain is food. It is bread. It is the direct result of last year's harvest. His children could eat that grain today.
It represents immediate, tangible security. It stops the hunger pains right now.
Exactly. It is the only thing standing between his family and starvation. And what does he do? He takes this certainty, this literal food, and he walks out into the scorching heat, and he buries it in the dirt.
He throws it in the mud.
He literally throws his survival into the ground.
To a logical observer who doesn't understand the laws of agriculture, that looks like absolute madness.
It looks like waste.
Yeah.
You are taking something incredibly valuable, edible, tangible wealth, and you are seemingly destroying it. You're hiding it in the dark. You are mixing it with dirt.
And the source emphasizes the physical toll of this, right? It's not just a casual toss into the yard.
No, it's grueling. The text describes the farmer shedding blood and sweat. He works all day, turning the heavy soil, watering it, protecting it from birds, keeping the pests away. And here's the kicker. This is the part that really hit me when I was reviewing the notes. He returns home every single evening empty-handed.
Man, that's the conviction part right there.
That is the conviction. He doesn't get paid at the end of the day. He doesn't see a sprout after a week. He might not see a single green leaf for months.
So he just has to wait.
He has to trust in the unseen process of growth. He has to trust that the laws of nature, which in this context are the laws of God, are actually going to work.
He has to believe that the soil, the rain, and the sun will do their job if he does his.
Right. And if he didn't have that conviction, if he started to doubt the process...
He would go out the next morning and dig up the seed to make sure it's still there.
Exactly. Are you still there? Are you growing? I need to check on my investment.
And doing that would kill the crop.
It kills the crop instantly. You have to leave it in the dark. You have to trust the process.
Wow.
The source argues that establishing a divine social order, or even just building your own individual soul, requires this exact specific type of patience.
You have to be willing to work without seeing immediate results.
You have to be willing to give away your wealth and be entirely okay with coming home empty-handed for a while.
That is such a countercultural idea for us today. We live in the economy of the click.
We do.
I click a button, I buy a thing, it arrives tomorrow on my porch. If it doesn't arrive, I complain and I get a refund. I track my package on my phone every step of the way. I demand visibility.
Instant gratification.
But this implies a timeline that is completely out of our control.
And that's exactly why it builds the self, because it forces you to override your biological panic.
The panic of letting go.
Right. Biology screams, I need food now. I need security now. Don't throw that grain away. But the integrated self says, no. I am planting this for a future harvest that is greater than my immediate hunger. That decision is the growth. That intense friction between what you want right now and what you believe will happen later, that is the gym where the soul is built.
It's basically the marshmallow test on a cosmic scale.
It is, but instead of a marshmallow, it's your life savings. And instead of waiting 15 minutes, you might be waiting an entire lifetime.
I love that image. But source material warns that there is a way to fake this planting.
Oh,
you can go through all the physical motions but miss the point entirely.
Copy.
And this brings us right into segment 3, which is the trap of the false ego.
This is where the text gets really critical. It talks about people who spend lots of money but who are doing it for the completely wrong why.
The text mentions the concept of Ria.
Ria, it basically translates to showing off or acting specifically to be seen by other people.
So it's a performance.
It comes from the root word regarding vision, to be seen. It's performing righteousness for an audience.
Let's use a modern example because I think this makes it really clear. The source talks about the hospital plaque scenario.
Right. And look, we really need to caveat this. We don't want to discourage people from building hospitals. Hospitals are good things. We need MRIs. We need doctors.
Yes, physical infrastructure is necessary.
But the source is analyzing the spiritual transaction here, not just the brick and mortar result.
To walk us through this transaction, how does the hospital plaque scenario actually work?
So imagine a wealthy individual gives $1 million to build a new wing of a hospital. But the condition, whether it's spoken out loud or just quietly understood, is that there must be a gala. There must be a big ribbon-cutting ceremony. The press must be invited. The photographers must capture the exact moment they hand over the giant novelty check.
Yep.
And ultimately, permanently, there must be a large brass plaque with their name on the wall.
The John Smith Wing, or the Foundation for the Future, brought to you by me.
Exactly. Now, the source argues a very specific point here. That is a business deal.
It's not charity.
It is a commercial transaction. You paid $1 million, and in exchange, you bought fame, you bought status, and you bought the admiration of your peers.
You bought social capital. You bought a product.
The transaction is complete in this world. The source says you absolutely cannot expect a receipt in the afterlife because you've already been paid.
You got exactly what you paid for.
You wanted applause, you got applause, transaction closed. The ledger is perfectly balanced.
Man. And the source even says that this kind of spending is the satisfaction of the false ego.
Yes, and it uses very harsh language to describe this. It equates this satisfaction of the false ego to being guided by Satan.
Which sounds pretty extreme to our modern ears.
It does sound extreme, but the logic is that the false ego is essentially a form of self-worship. You aren't actually serving the poor, you are serving your own image, and you are just using the poor as props.
Wow.
The poor are just the backdrop for your movie about how great you are.
There was a litmus test mentioned in the text that I found really brilliant. It effectively asks, what if you removed the public recognition?
That is the ultimate test. If no one would ever know, if there were no thank you notes, if there was no tax deduction to claim,
Right.
if no one in the world would ever know you gave that money, would you still give it?
Let's say the hospital came to you and said, we will gladly take your $1 million, but we will never ever tell a single soul it came from you. Would the check still clear?
And the source suggests for these people, the ones suffering from RIA, the answer is a flat no.
They would walk away.
If the answer is no, then the intent was never aid. The intent was purchase. And if it was a purchase, it wasn't, in fact.
So it didn't do the tunnel thing. It didn't grow the zat.
It didn't grow the self. It just
right.
inflated the ego. It's like eating empty calories. You feel completely full, but you're actually starving nutritionally.
The Quran gives a really vivid metaphor for this exact type of person in verse 264. It compares them to a hard rock.
This is a beautiful piece of imagery, but also devastating. Imagine a smooth, hard boulder, just a massive piece of solid granite. And over time, a little bit of dust and soil naturally settles on top of it, just a thin, superficial layer of dirt.
So to the naked eye, if I'm just walking past it, it looks like earth. It looks like a little hill. I could maybe even plant some grass on it and it would grow a bit.
Exactly. It mimics a field, it mimics fertility. It looks exactly like the farmer's field we talked about earlier.
Right.
But then comes the heavy rain. The Arabic word used is wabil, which means a torrential downpour, a massive storm. Now remember, in the farmer metaphor we just discussed, rain is good. Rain is what makes the seed grow.
Right. Rain is life. Rain is the blessing that brings the harvest.
But here, because there is no depth, because there is absolutely no root system to hold anything together, that same heavy rain washes the soil right off the rock.
It strips it bare.
It strips away the pretense. It leaves the rock totally bare, hard, and useless.
So the crisis, the rain, reveals the actual foundation.
Precisely. The rain represents the tests of life. That could be financial ruin, sickness, loss of your reputation, or ultimately the test of death.
Yeah.
If your charity was just a thin layer of soil over a hard, impenetrable ego, the crisis will wash it all away. You will be left with absolutely nothing.
And the source contrasts this with a garden on a hill with deep soil, right?
Yes. When the rain hits that deep soil, it doesn't wash away. It soaks in. It actually yields double the harvest because it has the depth to absorb the blessing.
It's just fascinating that the exact same event, the heavy rain, destroys one and blesses the other. The difference isn't the external event, it's the internal depth.
That is the absolute core of the argument. The internal state determines the outcome of the external action. You cannot cheat the physics of the soul. You can fool the people at the gala, you can fool the tax man, you can even fool yourself. But you cannot fool the rain.
Wow. Moving into segment 4, we've talked about showing off, which is Rhea, but the source mentions another really common way to ruin the act of infaq, and that is injury.
Yes. Infaq followed by injury, or, in the terminology of the text, man and aza.
This is the I made you attitude. The I helped you when you were nothing speech that we see in movies.
We've all heard it. Or maybe, and this is uncomfortable to admit for a lot of people, we felt it ourselves. It is incredibly insidious.
How does it usually play out?
Think about it. You lend money to a friend who's struggling, or you help a relative get a job, and you feel really good about it. You feel generous.
Right, you did a good deed.
But then a month later, they don't do something you want them to do. Maybe they disagree with you on politics, or they don't show up to your birthday party, or they make a life choice you really disapprove of.
And that ugly little thought bubbles up.
After all I did for you, you owe me. Who do you think you are to disagree with me after I paid your rent?
It turns the gift into
A
a...
leash. Exactly. The source argues that this sentiment completely nullifies the deed. The word is batil. It cancels it out completely.
It makes it...
Void. Because again, you have turned it into a transaction. You didn't give, you purchased their subservience. You essentially bought a slave. You bought the right to control their behavior.
There's a radical reframing in the text here about how the giver should view the recipient to avoid this trap. Because usually the dynamic is very hierarchical.
Right. Giver is up here, looking down from their pedestal. Recipient is down there, looking up in need. Giver is the noble benefactor. Recipient should be eternally grateful.
But the source flips that hierarchy entirely upside down. It argues that the giver should actually feel relieved. That's definitely not a word I associate with writing a large check. I usually feel lighter in the wallet, maybe a bit virtuous, but relieved.
It makes perfect sense if you accept the underlying premise of the nizam, or the system. The argument is based on the idea that the wealth you have isn't actually yours to begin with.
It's not mine.
No, it belongs to God, and it is strictly due to the poor. It's a right, a hack of the poor person. You are just the temporary delivery mechanism.
So I'm essentially just holding it. I'm the custodian.
You are a custodian. Imagine for a second you are holding an envelope of cash for me. It's my money, but you are holding it for safekeeping. That's a pretty heavy responsibility, right? If you lose it, you're in trouble with me.
Be stressed holding your cash.
So when I finally come to collect it from you, do you expect me to fall on my knees and weep with gratitude, thanking you for giving it back?
Obviously not. I just hand it over and I say, hey, here you go.
In fact, you might thank me for coming to get it because you don't have to worry about carrying it around and losing it anymore. You are finally discharged of the duty.
That is a wild shift in perspective. So the poor person is actually doing me a favor by taking the money.
Yes.
Because they are actively allowing me to discharge my spiritual duty and thereby grow my zat.
Exactly. They are the essential vehicle for your growth. Without them, you cannot grow. Without the recipient, the tunnel of inflock is blocked. The flow stops.
So who should be thanking whom?
The source says you should give without expecting even a basic thank you. If you expect gratitude, you have polluted the act. You've made it about your own ego.
It changes the social dynamic entirely, doesn't it? It completely removes the humiliation of poverty and the arrogance of wealth in one single stroke.
That is exactly the design. It completely equalizes the human dignity involved in the transaction.
And this leads us to the deeper psychological mechanics of why this matters so much. We've talked about the what giving without injury, giving without showing off. But let's dig into the why. This leads to segment 5, which revolves around the concept of
Tathbeat. This is the absolute core psychological concept in these texts. It is the engine room of the soul.
The expert in the source material translates this specific word as integration.
Yes. Integration,
Yes.
or making steadfast, stabilizing, rooting. But integration is a very useful psychological framework here. It suggests that without this active process, the human personality is inherently disintegrated.
Scattered. Just fragments.
Scattered. Think about the average human state on any given day. We are torn between so many conflicting desires. It's like a civil war inside our heads. I want to be a good person, but I also really want to be rich. I want to be generous, but I'm terrified of being poor. I want to be honest, but I really want people to like me. We are just a bundle of contradiction.
We are totally fluid. We just take the shape of whatever container we're put in. I'm one person at work, I'm a slightly different person at home, another person entirely with my old friends.
All right. We lack a center. If the stock market crashes, we crumble emotionally. If we get a big promotion, we become arrogant and insufferable. We have no solid core. We are entirely reactive. We are just leaves blowing in the wind.
So the concept of tathbeat is that you use, in fact, this active, painful sacrifice to weld these scattered pieces together.
Yes.
But how does giving money weld your personality? That seems like a pretty big leap.
It's all about agency. Think about what happens in the moment of giving. Your biological instinct screams, keep. It says, I need this for survival. That is a powerful primal drive. It is millions of years of evolution telling you to hoard resources. But the divine law, the higher principle you have consciously chosen to follow, says give.
So you have a conflict, a really high-stakes internal conflict.
You have a conflict. When you obey the law and you intentionally ignore the instinct, you prove to your own deepest psyche that you are actually in control.
You prove you aren't just an animal.
You are not a slave to your biology. You are not a slave to fear. Every single time you give, despite the very real fear of poverty, you are hammering a rivet into your soul. You are saying to the universe, I am an agent of my own will. I am not a victim of my own appetite.
You're building
A cohesive character, one that is consistent across all environments. The Source uses the metaphor of the garden again here. The garden with deep roots, the integrated self, produces food whether the rain is heavy or whether the rain is light. It is stable. It doesn't fluctuate wildly based on external economic conditions.
And what is the ultimate goal of this integration? Because the Source gets pretty metaphysical here. It talks about why we actually need this stability. It's not just to be a chill, grounded person in this life.
No, it goes much further. It talks about evolutionary stages.
Right. It says the Zot has to survive death.
The analogy often used in these types of philosophies, and it's heavily alluded to here, is
The womb. Let's explore that.
think about a human fetus developing in the womb. It starts growing eyes. Why?
Well, it's pitch black in there. There is absolutely nothing to see. The eyes are completely useless in the womb.
Correct. And it develops lungs. Why? There is no air to breathe and amniotic fluid. It gets all its oxygen directly from the umbilical cord. The lungs are actually a burden in the room. They're dead weight.
It is developing physical organs for a world it has never even seen.
Exactly. It is preparing for the next stage of existence. If the baby somehow decides, hey, I'm comfortable here, it's warm, I don't need lungs, I don't need eyes, what happens?
It will be born stillborn, or it'll be born entirely unable to interact with the new world. It cannot survive the transition to the new environment.
So the Source is arguing that Tathbeat, this fully integrated self built through sacrifice, is the lungs for the next life.
Man, that is profound.
The Source concludes that a disintegrated personality, a false ego that just washes away like dirt on a rock, literally cannot survive or thrive in the next stage of human evolution.
It just lacks the organ of survival.
It lacks the cohesion to hold itself together when the physical body falls away. You need a solid, integrated Zat to navigate what comes next. And Infaq is the gymnasium where you build that exact muscle.
It really takes the whole idea of charity entirely out of the realm of just being nice and puts it squarely into the realm of survival.
It is existential survival. It is the literal difference between life and death, just not the biological kind. It frames this entire life simply as a preparation ground.
Let's zoom out for segment 6, because the source material isn't just talking about individual salvation in a vacuum. It heavily talks about a system, a nizami rububiyat.
The system of divine sustenance.
Because if everyone did this, if everyone actually practiced infaq instead of accumulation, society would look incredibly different.
Completely unrecognizable. The source is actually quite harsh on our current status quo. It directly critiques the idea of the rich keeping the poor destitute just so they can feel good about giving them occasional crumbs.
Right.
It heavily critiques the charity model where we purposefully maintain systemic poverty just to allow for the occasional grand act of benevolence.
It calls it a cycle of humiliation.
It is a cycle of humiliation. Think about it. If you have a system where 90% of people are barely scraping by and the 10% get to feel like literal heroes for throwing them a bone once a year at a gala, that is not a divine system.
Nice.
That is a broken system. That is a massive human failure masquerading as generosity.
The ultimate goal mentioned in the texts is a society where the state actually guarantees sustenance for everyone.
Right. Where the sheer shame of begging is entirely removed from the human experience, and interestingly, where the arrogance of giving is also removed.
Because if the system itself is providing the baseline, you don't get to play the savior anymore.
Exactly. We become equal partners in a system, not masters and slaves. The wealth circulates just like blood in a healthy body. When blood circulates freely, the body is healthy. When blood pools in one place and stops moving, what happens?
You get a clot, and the body dies.
You get a clot and the organism dies. Hoarded wealth is a blood clot in the social body.
It levels the playing field completely. Now, the source gives a historical example to prove that this kind of unity, this flow, is actually possible in reality. It mentions the 1965 war involving Pakistan.
This is a really fascinating anecdote from the source, and it's used as a real-world case study in collective psychology. It describes a terrifying moment of existential threat for the nation. Enemy tanks are physically crossing the border. The nation is essentially outgunned and outmatched. The very survival of the collective is on the line.
And what actually happened on the streets during that time?
The source describes an instant, almost miraculous shift in the collective psychology of the people. Suddenly, all the petty differences just evaporated. The hoarding stopped overnight.
Wow.
People literally open their doors. They share whatever food they had with strangers. The crime rate dropped to near zero across the board. The source points out that the severe lack of material resources was perfectly compensated by a massive surplus of conviction.
The farmer's conviction again.
Exactly. But this time on a national macro scale, people were suddenly willing to sacrifice everything they had because the individual self had merged with a higher purpose, the survival of the whole community.
I became we.
The boundary between my grain and your hunger just completely dissolved.
The source laments that it didn't last, though. Right?
That's the tragedy of the story. Once the immediate military threat passed, people slowly went right back to their old ways.
The rock emerged again.
The rock emerged, the soil washed away. But the source uses it as a vital proof of concept. It argues, look, you saw it, you felt it. For a fact, it's possible for human beings to live like that. Humans are deeply capable of that extreme level of tathbeat. The true goal is to learn to live like that without a literal war forcing you to do it out of fear.
To make that elevated state of high integration permanent.
That is the ultimate goal of the chrononic social order, according to these texts. A permanent state of wartime unity, but enjoyed in peacetime prosperity. A society where every individual finds their personal growth exclusively in the service of the whole.
So let's try to bring this all home. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with the physics of the soul. The counterintuitive idea that you actually grow by giving, not by consuming.
The fundamental inversion of material logic. The realization that hoarding is spiritual atrophy.
We talked about the farmer.
The absolute necessity of working in the dark, trusting the unseen process, and having the sheer conviction to bury your hard-earned assets in the soil of the divine system, even when it hurts.
Especially when it hurts.
Right. If it doesn't hurt, it might not be a sacrifice.
Then we warned against the hospital plaque.
The dangerous trap of the false ego. If you buy fame with your charity, you don't get growth. You just get a piece of brass on a wall. And when the heavy rain comes, and it will definitely come, you wash away entirely.
We heavily reframed the recipient.
They aren't a burden. They are your literal path to salvation. You don't demand gratitude from the person who helps you discharge your heavy duty. You thank them.
And finally, we ended on tathbeat.
Integration. The act of welding your scattered personality together through continuous sacrifice so it can survive the brutal transition of death and continue its evolution into the next stage.
It really forces you to look at your bank statement in a totally different way. It's not just a ledger of what you have accumulated. It's essentially a ledger of what you haven't used to grow yet.
That is a very powerful way to put it. It's just potential energy waiting to be converted into kinetic spiritual energy. As long as it just sits there in the bank, it's just potential. It's just grain rotting in the silo.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought today. Something for you to chew on as you go about your week. We talked a lot about the rock and the garden.
We did.
And the important thing to remember is that the exact same rain falls on both of them. The inevitable crises of life, financial loss, sudden sickness, aging, and eventually mortality. That rain falls on absolutely everyone.
It does. You cannot escape the rain. The rain is the one universal constant in life.
The real question you have to ask yourself is, what is your soil depth? When that heavy rain finally hits you, are you going to wash away into the mud because your goodness was just a thin, performative layer of being nice just to look good to others? Or are you going to blossom because you spent a quiet lifetime burying your seeds in the dark, building a massive root system, and asking the world for absolutely nothing in return?
That really is the question. Are you a consumer of existence, or are you a contributor? Because in this specific model of the universe, only the contributors actually survive.
Heavy stuff,
but
necessary stuff. Until the next deep dive, keep digging.